The cameras were rolling. The audience was laughing. Morgan Freeman was mid-sentence, telling one of his classic stories with that unmistakable voice that had narrated 1,000 moments of cinema magic. And then, without warning, he stopped, reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Jimmy Fallon's smile froze. The laughter died. For the first time in his 30-year career as a performer, Jimmy Fallon had absolutely no idea what to say. What happened next wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw, unfiltered human emotion on live television, and it changed everything anyone thought they knew about late-night talk shows. 3 hours earlier, Studio 6B at Rockefeller Center was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy. Producers racing through last-minute notes, the audience filing in with phones ready to capture every moment, the Roots running through their opening number. It was February 14th, 2024, just another Thursday night taping of The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Or so everyone thought. Morgan Freeman had been booked weeks in advance to promote his latest film, but this wasn't just any promotional appearance. Freeman, at 86 years old, rarely did talk shows anymore. His team had been selective, almost protective of his time and energy. But when Jimmy's producers reached out, Freeman said yes immediately. "I'll do it for Jimmy," he told his publicist. "That kid has a good heart." Jimmy didn't know it yet, but Morgan Freeman wasn't there to talk about a movie. Backstage, in the green room where guests waited before their segment, Morgan sat alone. He wasn't reviewing talking points or checking his phone like most guests did. He was holding an envelope. A weathered, cream-colored envelope with handwriting on the front that read, "To Mr. Freeman. Please give this to Jimmy Fallon when the time is right." The envelope had arrived at Morgan's home 3 weeks earlier. It was from a woman named Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old elementary school teacher from Toledo, Ohio. Sarah was dying. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She had maybe 2 months left, her doctors said. Maybe less. But Sarah wasn't writing to ask for anything for herself. She was writing about her father. Jimmy stopped mid-joke. The entire studio froze. On stage, the interview had started like any other. Jimmy and Morgan exchanged pleasantries, bantered about Morgan's iconic roles, joked about his legendary voice. The audience was eating it up. The Roots provided the perfect musical punctuation to every punchline. Everything was going exactly as planned. Then Morgan leaned forward, and his entire demeanor changed. "Jimmy," he said, his voice suddenly serious in a way that cut through the studio like a knife. "Before we go any further, I need to show you something." Jimmy's smile remained, but confusion flickered in his eyes. This wasn't in the notes. This wasn't part of the segment rundown. The producers in the control room leaned closer to their monitors. Morgan reached into his jacket and pulled out the note. The camera operator, trained to catch every moment, zoomed in slightly. The audience, sensing something shifting in the atmosphere, went quiet. "A few weeks ago," Morgan began, "I received a letter from a young woman named Sarah. She's a schoolteacher. She's also dying of cancer." The air left the room. You could hear it happen, an audible gasp from 300 people all at once. Jimmy's face went pale. His hands, which had been gesturing animatedly just seconds before, fell still on his desk. Morgan continued, his voice steady but weighted with emotion. "Sarah wrote to me not because she wanted anything for herself, but because she wanted me to deliver a message to you. She wanted you to know what you did for her father." Jimmy blinked. "Her father?" Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Morgan unfolded the notes slowly, deliberately. The paper was thin, clearly worn from being read and reread multiple times. His hands, those same hands that had held Oscar statues and acted opposite the greatest actors in Hollywood, trembled slightly. Sarah's father was named David Mitchell. Morgan read aloud. He was a factory worker in Toledo. Worked the night shift for 32 years. In 2019, he was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. He was only 58 years old. Jimmy's throat tightened. He wasn't sure where this was going, but he could feel the weight of it pressing down on his chest. Morgan looked up from the note, directly into Jimmy's eyes. "David Mitchell loved your show, Jimmy." Every single night after his shift, no matter how tired he was, he would come home and watch The Tonight Show. Sarah says it was the only thing that made him laugh during the hardest year of his life. The camera caught it, the exact moment Jimmy's eyes began to glisten. As the Alzheimer's progressed, Morgan continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. David started forgetting things. He forgot his coworkers' names. He forgot where he worked. He forgot what year it was. But Sarah writes that there was one thing he never forgot. Morgan paused. The silence in the studio was so complete you could hear the hum of the stage lights. He never forgot your name, Jimmy. Even when he couldn't remember his own daughter's name, he would see you on that screen and say, "That's Jimmy. He's my friend." A single tear rolled down Jimmy Fallon's face. He didn't wipe it away. He just sat there, hands pressed flat against his desk, trying to hold himself together. Behind the scenes, Fallon made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. In the control room, the executive producer was already making calculations. Commercial break. Regroup. Get Jimmy composed. This was too raw, too unscripted. They needed to regain control of the show. But Jimmy did something he'd never done before in over a decade of hosting The Tonight Show. He stood up. He didn't walk to his mark. He didn't signal to the cameras. He just stood, walked around his desk, and sat down in the chair next to Morgan Freeman. Not as a host. As a human being. The audience didn't know whether to clap or cry. Most did both. Jimmy's voice, when he finally found it, was barely above a whisper. Is David still?" Morgan shook his head gently. "He passed away in December 2019. But Sarah wanted you to know that in his final months, when he couldn't recognize his own home, when he was scared and confused, you were the constant." Every night at 11:35, Sarah would turn on The Tonight Show, and for that 1 hour, her father would smile. He would laugh. He would be himself again. Jimmy covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. This wasn't the polished, energetic host that millions knew. This was a 49-year-old man completely overwhelmed by the weight of knowing that his silly games, his celebrity impressions, his musical numbers had meant everything to a dying man and his daughter. Morgan placed his hand on Jimmy's shoulder. "She wanted you to know that you gave her father his last year of joy. You gave him dignity when the disease was taking everything else away. And she wanted to say thank you." The cameras kept rolling. The producers in the control room stopped trying to cut away. This was television history unfolding in real time. Jimmy finally looked up, his face streaked with tears. "I don't..." He started, then stopped. "I don't know what to say." Morgan smiled, that warm, paternal smile that had comforted audiences in 100 films. "You don't have to say anything, son. You already said it. Every single night. To David. To Sarah. To millions of people who needed to laugh when the world felt too heavy. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming." From the audience, a woman stood up. She was young, mid-30s, wearing a simple blue dress. Her face was thin, her skin pale, but her eyes were bright with tears. It was Sarah Mitchell. Morgan had arranged it all. Sarah had been flown in from Toledo that morning. She'd been sitting in the 4th row the entire time, waiting for this moment. Jimmy's head snapped toward the audience. He saw her standing there, hands clasped in front of her, crying openly. Without hesitation, without asking permission, without thinking about cameras or protocol or anything else, Jimmy Fallon walked off the stage. He walked down the steps, through the audience, until he stood in front of Sarah Mitchell. And then, in front of 300 strangers and millions watching at home, he hugged her. Not a celebrity hug. Not a photo op hug. A real, desperate, holding on for dear life hug. "Thank you," Sarah whispered into his shoulder. Thank you for giving my dad back to me, even if it was just for an hour every night." Jimmy couldn't speak. He just held her tighter. The audience rose to their feet. The applause started slowly, then built into a thunderous standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. The Roots put down their instruments. The cameramen wiped their eyes. Even the hardened producers in the control room were crying. When Jimmy finally released Sarah, he kept holding her hands. "Your dad," he said, his voice cracking. "David. Tell me about him. Tell me who he was." And right there, in the middle of the studio audience, with cameras still rolling and 300 people watching, Sarah told Jimmy about her father. About how he loved to sing off-key in the car. About how he made the world's worst pancakes but insisted on making them every Sunday. About how he'd work double shifts to send her to college. About how even when he couldn't remember her name, he would hold her hand and tell her he loved her. Jimmy listened to every word. He didn't rush her. He didn't think about the show running long. He just listened. Finally, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It showed David Mitchell in his favorite chair, watching TV, a huge smile on his face. The TV screen in the background showed Jimmy Fallon doing one of his celebrity impressions. "This was taken about 3 weeks before he passed," Sarah said. "It's my favorite picture of him." Jimmy took the photograph with trembling hands. He stared at it for a long moment, at this man he never met but who had been, in some strange and beautiful way, connected to him every single night. Then Jimmy did something that would become one of the most iconic moments in talk show history. He removed his tie. That silk tie, part of his signature look, the armor of a professional television host, he took it off right there in the middle of the audience. He folded it carefully, and he placed it in Sarah's hands. "I want you to have this," he said. "Every night I put this on, I'm putting on the uniform of someone who gets to make people laugh. Your dad reminded me why that matters. Why any of this matters." Sarah clutched the tie to her chest, sobbing. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The show never returned to its normal format that night. When Jimmy finally made his way back to the stage, he didn't do any more comedy bits. He didn't play any games. He just sat there, with Morgan Freeman, and they talked. Really talked. About life, about loss, about the strange and miraculous ways that human beings connect across distances and circumstances. The Roots played "Lean on Me" as the show ended. Jimmy didn't say his usual sign-off. He just looked into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, and you're going through something hard, I hope you know you're not alone. And I hope you know that sometimes the smallest things we do, the things we think don't matter, they matter more than we could ever imagine." The episode never aired in its original form, but clips of it spread across social media within hours. Jimmy Fallon stopped show for dying woman became the most watched video online that week, with over 80 million views. News outlets from CNN to BBC covered it. But more than that, it sparked something. Letters started pouring in. Thousands of them. From people all over the world who wanted to share their own stories of how late-night comedy had helped them through depression, through loss, through divorce, through illness. People who felt seen for the first time. Jimmy read every single one. He couldn't help himself. 3 weeks after the episode, Sarah Mitchell passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by family. Among her possessions, clutched in her hand, was Jimmy's tie. At her funeral, the eulogy included a line that Sarah had written herself before she died. "My father taught me that joy is a form of resistance. That laughter is how we fight back against the darkness. And Jimmy Fallon, whether he knew it or not, was my father's co-conspirator in that fight." When Jimmy heard about Sarah's passing, he didn't make a public statement. He didn't tweet about it. Instead, he flew to Toledo on his day off and attended her funeral. He sat in the back, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, and he cried along with everyone else. After the service, Sarah's mother approached him. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a note from Sarah, written in the final days of her life. It read, Dear Jimmy, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But I need you to know something. The night you hugged me in that studio, you gave me the same gift you gave my father. You reminded me what it feels like to be seen, to be valued, to matter. That's what you do, Jimmy. Not just for celebrities or famous people, but for ordinary people like me and my dad. You make us feel like we matter. Please don't ever stop. The world needs people like you. More than you know. With love and gratitude, Sarah. Jimmy kept that note in his wallet. It's still there. The tie he gave Sarah was returned to him after her funeral. Her family thought he should have it back. But Jimmy didn't keep it. He had it framed, along with the photograph of David Mitchell watching The Tonight Show, and he hung it in his dressing room. Every night before he walks onto that stage, Jimmy Fallon looks at that photograph. At David Mitchell's smile. At the proof that what he does matters in ways he'll never fully understand. And every night he walks out there knowing that somewhere, someone is watching who needs to laugh. Who needs to forget their pain for just 1 hour. Who needs to remember that joy, even in the darkest times, is still possible. That's not just entertainment. That's not just late-night television. That's humanity at its best. And that's the legacy of a tie, a note, and the man who reminded Jimmy Fallon why he does what he does.